Moving to New York was my chance at a fresh start. I quickly adapted to the city's relentless pace, but sometimes I craved peace. That's why I often found myself walking through Battery Park late at night. It felt like a small oasis of calm in a city that never sleeps. That night, everything was different. I remember every detail. The light autumn breeze, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, and how everything seemed unnaturally quiet. The park was nearly empty, just me and a few distant figures. It all began when I passed by the old oak tree near one of the park's vintage lampposts. On the bench beneath the tree, a woman was sitting. At first, I didn't think much of it, but as I got closer, her appearance caught my eye. She was dressed in a long Victorian-style gown, as though she had stepped out of another era. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and she was staring at the water, motionless. "Good evening," I said. She didn't respond. My greeting was swallowed by the cold silence. The woman sat so unnaturally still that I thought she might be a mannequin or some sort of art installation. But something about her unsettled me. Her hair didn't stir, even though the wind was blowing. Her hands rested on her lap as if they'd been carefully placed there. And one more thing. Her silhouette reflected in the water, but not completely. I quickened my pace, trying not to look back. But when I glanced over my shoulder, the bench was empty. When I got home, the unease stayed with me. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman. What was she doing there? Why did she vanish so quickly? I decided to look up Battery Park. Maybe it was part of some art exhibit. But what I found was far stranger. On a forum, people were discussing ghostly sightings in the park. They wrote about strange figures that appeared at night, only to disappear the moment you looked away. One figure was mentioned repeatedly, a woman in a long dress. "Her name is Lillian," one user wrote. "She drowned in the Hudson over 100 years ago. They say she's searching for someone to help her find her way home." A chill ran down my spine. It sounded absurd, I knew, but the coincidence was too strange to ignore. The next evening, I decided to go back. It was reckless, but curiosity overpowered fear. I walked to the same oak tree. The bench was empty. I felt a slight relief, but something in the air wasn't right. The wind had stopped, and the park felt too still, as if it were holding its breath. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. By the water stood a figure. It was her. I froze, trying to discern if she was looking at me. Her face was blurred, as if obscured by a thin veil of smoke. I took a step closer, then another. "Who are you?" I asked, though my voice trembled. She didn't answer. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, almost indistinguishable, yet it felt as though it was inside my head. "Help me." The whisper grew louder. I felt an icy chill seep into my bones. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Everything around me began to blur, and I heard a new sound, the splash of water like someone drowning. Her figure vanished, but her final words hung in the air, quiet and desperate. "You won't leave either." That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt her presence as if she were standing just outside my bedroom door, waiting. The next day, I dove deeper into my research. Lillian's story was real. Her name appeared in the archives. She had drowned in 1887 trying to save her brother. But her brother survived. Since then, according to legend, her spirit had wandered the park, searching for someone to help her finish what she started. I can't go back to Battery Park, because now I hear her whispers everywhere. I tried to forget that night in Battery Park. I wanted to convince myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but Lillian wasn't going to let me go so easily. The next day, it started with small things. As I walked down the street, I caught the silhouette of a woman in the reflection of a shop window. She stood on the opposite side of the road, motionless, her eyes locked on me. I stopped and turned around. She was gone. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to shake it off, but as I continued walking, I kept seeing her. In the shadows between buildings, in the blurry reflections of car windows, her figure appeared again and again. By evening, I was completely exhausted. I closed all the curtains in my apartment, but it didn't help. The whispers returned. At first, they were faint, like a soft breeze. But by midnight, they had grown louder, clearer. "Help me." I rushed to the light switch and turned on every lamp in the apartment. The whispers stopped. For a moment, I felt relieved, but then I heard another sound. Soft tapping, like bare footsteps in the hallway. "Who's there?" I yelled, clutching my phone. There was no answer, just quiet laughter echoing through the room. I stayed up all night staring into the shadows. The next day, I went to the library to learn more about Lillian. A staff member in the archives pulled an old newspaper article from the late 19th century. "Tragedy in the Hudson," the headline read. The article told the story of a woman, Lillian Marsh, who drowned in the river while trying to save her younger brother. But as I read further, I came across something strange. In her final letter, Lillian mentioned feeling pursued by a dark force. Her friends claimed that in the days leading up to the tragedy, she was despondent and spoke of voices that wouldn't leave her alone. Voices, whispers, it all matched. But there was another detail that chilled me to the core. The article stated that Lillian was buried in an old cemetery, just a few miles from my apartment. That night, I heard her whispers again. "You must help me." I didn't respond. I felt the air in the room turn cold. My breath became visible and the whispers grew louder. "You cannot leave. No one leaves." I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. Suddenly, all the lights in the apartment went out, plunging the room into complete darkness. In the blackness, I saw her. She stood in the corner of the room, just as still as before. But this time, her face was clear. It didn't show anger, only desperation. "You must come. Come to the river," she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I froze, trying to understand whether she was real or just a product of my mind, but before I could say anything, she disappeared. The next morning I felt drained, but I knew one thing. I couldn't ignore her. She wouldn't go away until I found out what she wanted. Now, I had a choice to make. I couldn't ignore her anymore. Lillian haunted me like a shadow that refused to disappear. The only thing left to do was to find the river she spoke of and uncover the truth. That evening, I returned to Battery Park. The sky was overcast, and a faint mist clung to the ground. With every step toward the water, the cold seemed to seep deeper into my bones. When I reached the shore, I froze. She was standing there, right at the water's edge. Her dress swayed gently in the breeze, and her arms were outstretched as if she was beckoning me. "Lillian!" I called out, my voice trembling. She turned slowly. Her face, once blurred, was now clear. It was the face of a woman consumed by pain and despair. "You came," she whispered. "What do you want?" I asked. Her dark, endless eyes seemed to pierce straight into my soul. "I can't leave," she said. "He won't let me." "Who is he?" I asked, but she didn't answer. Instead, Lillian pointed toward the water. I followed her gaze and saw something that shouldn't have been there. The water reflected the sky and trees, but beneath the surface, there was movement, something large gliding silently below. The whispers grew louder, building into a deafening hum. It came from everywhere and nowhere, as if it was both outside and inside my head. "He's coming," Lillian whispered. Suddenly, the water began to churn, as though something massive was rising from the depths. I took a step back, unable to tear my eyes away from the unfolding nightmare. A dark, shapeless figure emerged from the water. Its form was indistinct, as though it was made of mist and shadows. "You must help me stop him," Lillian said, her voice urgent and almost pleading. "How?" I shouted, but there was no answer. The entity extended something that resembled an arm toward me, and I felt the air around me constrict. My head spun and my vision began to blur. I heard Lillian's final desperate cry, "Save him," and then everything went black. I woke up on the shore, right where I had been standing. There was no mist, no Lillian, no creature, only the gentle lapping of the water and the cold wind. But it wasn't over. In the sand directly in front of me were 2 footprints leading into the water, alongside a message. "He will return.